Nebraska's 2024 regular season is in the rearview mirror. So it's finally time to go over a complete assessment of the Husker season. Was it a failure? Was it a good step in the right direction? Or was it somewhere in between? And then I'm going to go over what Nebraska needs to do throughout the offseason in order to compete for the Big Ten next year and make a massive jump. So really quick, I have a jam-packed episode for you guys today. Make sure to hit that like button if you're fired up. And hey, really quick, if you're new to the channel or a returning viewer, make sure to subscribe. I'm on the road to 8,000 subscribers, and I post daily Husker football content and recruiting news. So if you're a diehard Husker fan, make sure to subscribe. You will be thanking yourself that you did. But without further ado, let's get into the video talking about Nebraska's 2024 season and answering the question. Was it a failure for the Huskers? Was it a really good step in the right direction? Or was it somewhere in between? Well, we heard all the talk throughout the summer. How many games will Nebraska win? We heard 8 wins, 9 wins. Some people were even saying double-digit 10 wins for the Big Red. Turns out Nebraska ends 500 at 6-6. They narrowly make a bowl game. To a lot of people, that's a good step in the right direction. But is it actually? Well, Nebraska went 5-7 last year. And it felt like all offseason long that Nebraska was getting better in every single aspect. Quarterback play obviously improved. Running back play improved. The entire offense a lot better than last year. The entire defense came back and was better than last year. So it felt like Nebraska's team was better in almost every single aspect. And if we were 5-7 last year, you'd imagine that we took a pretty big jump this season. That turned out to not be the case. The Huskers only win one more game. So that was frustrating off the bat for the Huskers. But then you look at our wins. Okay, we started off the season beating UTEP, one of the worst teams in all of FBS football, it turned out to be. Okay, we beat Northern Iowa, an FCS squad. Okay, you beat one of the worst Power 5 teams in Purdue. And by the way, it was 0-0 at halftime in that ball game. Okay, you beat a pretty average Rutgers team at home and you only put up 14 points. Okay, and then you beat a bad Wisconsin team, one of the worst they've had in the last 2 decades. They miss out on the bowl game. Okay. So that's 5 wins right there. The only good win on Nebraska's schedule really was that Colorado game. Turned out to be a very good win because, they won, 9 football games this year? They are very, very good. So that makes it 6. But really what hurts Nebraska, when we look back on this year, once again, we've been saying this for, the last 5 years, missed opportunities. Okay, you barely lost to Iowa in the last second. You gave that game to them. You gave the game to Ohio State. You should have won that football game against one of the best teams in the country in Columbus, and you blew it. You blew that USC game. You blew that Illinois game. You had an opportunity to throw to a wide open Luke Lindenmeyer in the end zone. You overthrew that football, went to overtime, and unfortunately did what Nebraska always does overtime. They lost. So those are 4 one-score losses right there where you had the win basically sealed, signed, and delivered, and you didn't do it. Okay. And let's say, again, the score was reversed. I know we've done this trick before. You would have won 10 games right there. That's not even including a UCLA game that was also a one-score loss. That was not a very good team that missed out on a bowl game. So I said all that to say this. The schedule was very manageable this year for Nebraska. So it hurts that we win 6-6 because, once again, it feels like a lot of the same mistakes that we've made in the past have reared their ugly heads. Now, a lot of people, there's 2 ways to look at this, okay? People will say, oh, it's progress because Nebraska got so close in these ball games. They were competing against really good teams. And then there's also people who would say this is bad because although we were competing, we once again could not get a win in a close ball game. It doesn't matter what you do in the 99% of the ball game. In that final 1%, if you can't win, it doesn't matter. I agree with that second point. So overall, it was a pretty average season. And I think Matt Rhule basically did the bare minimum for the Huskers. If he didn't make a bowl game, let's say he lost that Purdue game. Let's say he lost that Colorado game and he missed a bowl game. Oh my goodness, we'd be in for a rough season. So one game pretty much changed the perception of Matt Rhule because if we did not make a bowl game, oh my goodness, he would be in for a tough time. We delay all those pretty tough conversations for next year. But again, I agree that we showed progress. I don't want to be too negative here because we went 6-6. I think the team got better. I think the talent was better. We showed progress. It's going to be pretty big for us next year. Okay, and I think a lot of these are learning opportunities, like the Iowa game, unfortunately, like the Ohio State game. They're learning opportunities. But here's my point, is that Nebraska really doesn't have a talent issue. Like we sit here and say, oh, we're going to develop talent. The talent's going to get better because of these rough games. And that's true, but we never had a talent issue. We're more talented than almost every single team we play. Okay. The thing that really discouraged me about this season was the coaching issues that continued to persist that we saw throughout year one. And I was willing to give Matt Rhule the benefit of the doubt in year one. Okay, he's acclimating to the Big Ten, to Lincoln. It is what it is. But it felt like Matt Rhule and his coaching staff made the exact same mistakes once again in year two. Okay, obviously bad play calling with Marcus Satterfield for 9 of the 12 weeks of the season, and we had to fire him mid-year. Bad clock management that lost us a couple ball games, once again for the second year in a row. Bad in-game decision-making in general. And it also felt like this isn't necessarily a coaching issue, but it felt like we, once again, have a culture issue. Not necessarily a culture of a bad culture being bought in. All these guys are bought in. All these guys love Nebraska, are good individuals. I believe that. So from that standpoint, the culture is good. But once again, I don't believe we have a culture of winning. And when the game gets tight for whatever reason, these guys don't have any confidence in themselves. They don't have any confidence in the coaching, and that's why we lose in the last second. We dominate 99% of the ball game, but when it matters the most, these guys can't make that big play to get the victory. Again, it's rooted in the Scott Frost era. I think a lot of the Scott Frost guys are haunting this team. It's going to be good when they graduate, but that's something that I really think we should address in the offseason. So that's the worst part about what I saw this year. I genuinely think we made some big improvements from this year to last year, and I think it's going to be pretty evident next year. I expect us to take a big jump next year. I expect us to win 9-10 games, and if we don't, that's a problem. Okay, spoiler alert. So listen, you got to fix all these little minor issues going into next year. Let's get into it. What does this mean for next year? Okay, because I get it. We got a bowl game left. Still technically part of the 2024 season, but when you look at this bowl game like it's an off-season game, like it's just a kind of an extra practice a little bit against a different team. That's how you're gonna approach this bowl game. I'm already focused on next year. What do we need to do? Because I know it kind of sucks right now, and of course we lost to Iowa. A lot of people are pessimistic, but we all know that we're gonna be drinking the Kool-Aid this time. Going into July next year, going into August next year, every single one of us is gonna be drinking the Kool-Aid. We're going to be talking about how good Dylan Raiola is going to be in year 2 and how he's going to take a big step. We're going to be talking about all the transfers we brought in. We're going to be talking about the great recruiting class we had. And not only are Nebraska fans going to be hyped up, it's going to be safe to say that the national media is going to hype us up too. We know this. And they're all going to be like, oh, Matt Rhule is going to take this big step. But how do we actually take the big step? Number one, you need better transfers in the transfer portal. And I think they need to be aggressive. I think they need to take 10 plus guys, 10 to 15 guys. Matt Rhule, his stance on the transfer portal, in my opinion, has been flawed. I'll be the first to tell you this. Okay. He has said in the past that he takes quality over quantity in the transfer portal. The reason this is flawed is because he hasn't took quality in the transfer portal. He doesn't hit on any of his transfer portal additions. Let's look back on the guys that we got this year. Isaiah Nair was not a great addition. Jamal Banks was not a great addition. Stephon Thompson was not a great addition. Micah Mazuka, that was a meh addition. Dante Dowdell, that was good. I'll give him credit. And Sear Wright was a good addition. But that's a hit rate of less than 50%. Let's go back to the year before in Matt Rhule's first year. Okay. Jeff Sims, bad addition. Corey Collier, bad addition. Josh Fleeks, bad addition. Billy Kemp, bad addition. Jacob Hood, bad addition. Tyler Kanak, bad addition. And sure, he had a couple hits in there. He had MJ Sherman, that was a decent one. Ben Scott, that was decent. Elijah Judy was decent. Chief Borders, eh. But again, he has a hit percentage of less than 50% in the portal. So first off, you got to take better quality, but I think you need to take more guys in general because there are some holes in this team. Okay, secondary is a big hole. And you lose Tommy Hill, you lose Isaac Gifford, you lose Deshaun Singleton, you lose some of your key starters. You're going to need to get some guys in the portal and secondary. Same on the offensive line. Okay, so that's number one. Be aggressive in the transfer portal. Number two, I think you need to be aggressive about special teams. Okay, you lose Buschini. Buschini, very inconsistent at times, but he provided you some really, really good punting. You need to get a transfer punter. You got to. You need to get a transfer kicker. And at the exact same time, you need to move on from Ed Foley. Ed Foley, I think, is a fine coach. He is not meant to be a special teams coordinator. Nowadays in college football, you can have an unlimited size coaching staff. He can go coach the offensive line, be an assistant coach in the O-line. I don't care. Get away from special teams. Need a new special teams coordinator. That's going to be huge. And then overall, Nebraska needs to implement a winning culture. Like I told you guys, I could sit here and talk about getting talent in the portal, getting talent in our recruiting class. I think next year we're going to be perfectly talented. I think we're going to be good enough to compete for a Big Ten talent next year, talent-wise. I believe that. But Matt Rhule, I don't know what he needs to do, but you got to implement a winning culture. It's one thing to be bought into this program. It's one thing to care about Nebraska. It's one thing to work hard on mat drills and through winter conditioning and through spring practice. But he needs to work on when the game gets tight. How can you possibly prepare these guys for those ball games throughout the offseason? How can you prepare these guys to be comfortable when you're uncomfortable, to embrace being uncomfortable? Okay, because this is a prove-it year. Year 3 is a prove-it year. Matt Rhule said time and time again that in year 3, he's going to take that big jump. He did it at Baylor. He did at Temple. It's time to start looking at the win column. And we need to have some legit wins. I'm talking 9 wins. I'm talking 8 wins at the bare minimum. Do what it takes. Be aggressive. And there's also going to be some coaches that you might need to let go from. And we'll talk about that throughout the offseason. And there might be a defensive coordinator who might be on the way out very soon as well. I don't care. Win football games. Find a way to do it. But you got to implement a winning culture. You got to be aggressive talent-wise. It starts now. Offseason starts now. This was a pretty underwhelming season. That's the bottom line. I was expecting 8 wins, around 7 wins. 6 wins was the bare minimum. Okay, you had to get 6 wins. If you did not make a bowl game this year, it would have been over for Matt Rhule. It really would have been. The fan base would have never trusted him. So thank goodness he clinched bowl eligibility and got to that bowl game. It was the bare minimum. It's put up or shut up time. You got to win next year. I think he does. But it's time to look at those results on the field. If you get anything less, we're going to have some tough conversations. So overall, I'm going to grade this season for Nebraska a C. Again, it was average. It was average. And I believe that we are talented enough to win 9-10 games. And to think, if we won 9-10 games, we would have been in the mix for the playoff. That's crazy to think about. But that's how big of a missed opportunity we had this year, unfortunately. So it's going to really haunt me. Some of the games that we blew this year, the Iowa game is going to haunt me. The UCLA game is really going to haunt me. The USC game is going to haunt me. Blowing that Ohio State game, which could have been a program-changing victory, is going to haunt me. And while people can say, oh, at least we're showing progress, it was a moral victory, at least we got close. No, because that 1% of the ball game that we blew is more important to me than the 99% that we played well in. Okay? It's not about those first 3 quarters. The most important quarter is the fourth quarter. The most important part of that fourth quarter is the final 5 minutes. And if you blow the game in the final 5 minutes, it doesn't matter how well you play in the rest of the game. Figure that out in the offseason. That's my final take. Let's win this bowl game. Let's have a winning season. That's paramount. Next year is going to be so important. So, all right, guys, let me know your thoughts around Nebraska's 2024 season. Now we can look back on it, have a full assessment of how well we did, how well we didn't do. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts. Hey, if you made this far in the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Also want to mention, hit bell notifications so you know when I post breaking recruiting news. Again, it's going to be that time of year. So you're going to want to know exactly when somebody commits or when there's some rumors going on. So make sure to hit that bell notification. But again, appreciate you guys as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And as always, folks, go Big Red, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.